just want to take a quick check on what the global markets are doing. So just bring up what the European markets are doing. And the Dow futures would be indicating, I think there the markets are very, very flat. So no big reactions that are coming in on any of the global markets as well in the session today. However, let's toss across to that conversation that Pradeep had with the Goldman Sachs team.
Two reasons. The first is we think the shocks that the economy has endured over the past year, the impact from demonetization and the GST reform, we think will fade out over the coming year, so less of a drag on growth. And then we do think the initiative to recapitalize public sector banks should be helpful in terms of easing credit conditions and boosting growth towards the end of the calendar year 2018.
Well, these recent reforms have actually been taken positively by most experts. But how do you really see, the divergence between the views of two leading rating agencies when it comes to Indian macros?
Well, I think most investors really, and clearly those from the equity side, but even to some extent from the fixed income side, they're looking at the broad growth, inflation, rate reform outlook. I don't think in the short term their decisions are driven dramatically by rating agencies' changes. Of course, those factor into the decisions, but I think the bigger driver of markets in 2018 will be: do we see the pickup in growth? I think it's likely we see a pickup. The question is how rapidly does that occur? Where does inflation go? I think it's pretty likely that'll move higher, partly because of global factors, partly for reasons of higher food inflation and other factors. And then how does RBI react to that? Are they comfortable at current rate levels, or will they feel the need to adjust as we go later in 2018?
We'll come to some of those points, once again. But do you think it's a matter of time before the S&P or other rating agency, the third rating agency, also kind of thinks of an upgrade?
We don't really try to predict rating agency decisions, so I don't have a view on whether they'll upgrade or not, frankly.
No, but actually, what is your medium-term outlook on India? Do you think, the kind of reforms we have undertaken have had a negative impact on growth, really? So there is a slowdown. Now you think the growth is coming back. Will that growth come back with stability, without compromising on, the fiscal path that we have in mind, and a very robust macroeconomic, or rather the monetary policy framework that we have in place for the first time in Indian history? If these things remain intact, then it's not only the short term, but a medium to long term outlook should also be very strong. So I want your view, with that perspective. Not really. I want you to predict what rating agency will do next.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. The shift in, for example, the RBI monetary policy regime, the efforts to implement things like the GST, which should facilitate more efficiency nationwide. I think these are clearly things that should boost potential output and growth. The question is the timing of that, more than whether it will happen. So I think you can see that, broadly speaking, investors are optimistic on this. You still have foreign equity investors overweight on Indian equities relative to their benchmarks, which suggests that they share some of the optimism about the reform agenda. The question is, and this is often the case with reforms, some short-term pain for longer-term gain. How much disruption is there in the short term, and when do you begin to see those benefits of the reforms? And that depends to a large extent on the efficacy of implementation and the staggering of the different reforms and the global backdrop, which we think will be pretty favorable in 2018.